Public speaking is actually an art. It doesn't matter what kind of speech you are giving or what is your purpose. At the end of the day, you are giving a performance on this stage in front of audience. It is not very much different from what musicians and theater actors do. They also prepare their performances beforehand. They practice it a lot, then they practice some more, then a bit more, and then they finally come on stage and perform it in front of an audience. And their purpose is usually one of these, either to entertain the people, or to inspire them, or just to simply tell a story. There is another art form, which I discovered a few years ago, and it is called spoken word poetry. It is the kind of poetry that you write on paper, but it demands to be performed live. It demands to be expressive, and it demands to be performed in front of a lot of people. And I discovered it about 3 years ago when I was watching a TED Talk by a very talented poet from New York City called Sarah Kay. And she gave a talk about spoken word poetry, and she performed a couple of her poems on the stage. One of them was called If I Should Have a Daughter. And I listened to her poem, and I listened to her speech, and I was surprised. I had no idea that poetry can be used in such kind of form as well, because I always heard and thought that poetry is something which is written on the paper, and something supposed to be read from a book. But I had no idea that it can actually be performed. It can be written to be performed by the author in front of an audience. And I was inspired. I thought, oh my God, this is something I can do. This is very cool medium to express myself. Maybe I can use it myself to express my thoughts and feelings and so on to other people. When it comes to writing, I think I'm a fairly good writer. When it comes to presenting my ideas or thoughts on a paper, I can do it usually in a very logical, straightforward way, and so that everyone can understand it clearly. But when I started to write poems, it was difficult. They got stuck in my head. Somehow, whenever I think about a poem, they sound absolutely amazing in my head. And as soon as I start to put them on the paper, they just don't feel right. I don't feel comfortable by how they are looking on the paper than how I imagine them to be. So 3 years later, and despite writing a few poems, I never really had the courage or felt enough comfortable to perform a poem in front of an audience. And for this project, I thought, okay, it's time. Today, I will perform a poem. I will give you a spoken word poetry performance in front of you, a very small one, and see how it goes. So the poem is called I Collect Questions. I collect questions. I met a collector once, and he asked me, what do I like to collect? And I said to him, I collect questions. The look of surprise on his face demanded more explanation. So I said to him, I collect questions because they are eternal. They stay with me for as long as I need them to be. But the answers are fleeing. They come, they destroy the magic, they end the stories, and they make things mundane. But questions, oh questions. Questions will stay with you even in your darkest moment. Like when you are wondering, why I am getting bullied. The question itself is much more calming than the answer, that it might be because of how you look or how you talk or how you speak. See, the answers can be hurtful. I collect questions because it gives me a sense of wonder. Give me limitless possibilities. Who am I? What am I? What is my purpose? Why am I here today? Am I a robot who is supposed to live a well-defined life for the rest of his life? Or maybe I am a superhero who just hasn't discovered his abilities yet. Am I a person who is going to work with software his whole life? Or maybe I am the savior that will take humanity to the next stage. See, the answers can be limiting. I collect questions because some things are just simply ugly. I look at that small little boy, Syrian boy, sitting in the back of that ambulance, covered in dust and blood, and I wonder, what is going on behind those shocked and innocent eyes? What is he thinking in that moment? Why did his home have to be destroyed? Why his family had to die like that? Who would want that small little boy to suffer in that way? See, the answers can be hurtful. I collect questions because some answers are just simply confusing. Who created this world? Who created us? Why? The gods? Which gods? Whose gods? The gods who let 6 million people die in gas chambers? Or the gods who bring floods and earthquakes just to punish people, which somehow always tend to kill the poor people? What kind of gods are these? How many of them? The gods who scare us by telling us about afterlife and hellfire? What kind of gods are these? See, the answers can be confusing. So I said to that collector, I collect questions because for me, questions are much more comforting and much more inspiring and much more beautiful than the answers they could ever provide. So I finally did my first spoken word poetry. I feel good about it. At least now. It helps that there are not many people today. So my first experience was